Milo had never imagined that life could change so quickly. 1 month ago, he had a small apartment in the city, a steady job, and just enough savings to feel secure. But in a matter of days, it all disappeared. His company had announced sudden layoffs, and Milo was one of the employees who lost his job. At first, he thought he could find another position quickly. He sent resumes and went to interviews, but nothing worked. Every answer was a polite refusal. At the same time, his apartment lease ended, and with no income, he had to leave. He packed his few belongings into a small bag and wandered the city streets, feeling lost and unsure about the future. The city that had once felt alive and full of opportunity now seemed empty and cold. Milo walked past tall buildings, crowded streets, and flashing billboards, but nothing caught his attention. Each day felt the same as the last. Friends called to ask how he was doing, but Milo could not explain the emptiness he felt. Even talking to people became tiring. He realized that he did not just lose money or a home, he had lost his sense of purpose. One evening, Milo sat on a small park bench looking at the sun setting behind the skyscrapers. The orange light reflected in the glass windows, but it felt distant and meaningless. He thought about the life he had left behind, the routine he had followed, and the dreams he had once held. None of it mattered anymore. Milo felt a deep need to escape, to go somewhere he could find himself again. That night, he made a decision that shocked even him. He would leave the city, leave everything behind, and go to the forest. Milo had always loved nature. As a child, he spent weekends hiking with his father. He remembered walking through tall trees, listening to birds, and feeling the wind on his face. The forest had always been a place of peace and freedom. He realized that now, more than ever, he needed that peace. So he packed what little he had, some clothes, a small cooking pot, a notebook, and a few personal items, and started walking toward the edge of the city. He took the train and then the bus, leaving behind the noise, the traffic, and the crowded streets. The closer he got to the forest, the lighter he felt. Each mile took him further from his past troubles. When Milo reached the forest, he stopped at the first small clearing he saw. The air smelled different here, fresh and earthy. Birds sang from the treetops and the wind moved gently through the leaves. He took a deep breath and felt a small spark of hope. For the first time in weeks, he felt calm. He carried his bag along a narrow path, walking carefully among the roots and rocks. He did not know exactly where he would stay, but he knew he would find something. After hours of walking, Milo stumbled upon something unexpected. Hidden behind thick vines and bushes was an old cabin. Its wooden walls were weathered and gray, and the roof had missing shingles. Windows were broken and the door hung slightly off its hinges. It looked abandoned, almost forgotten by time, but Milo felt a strange pull toward it. He stepped closer, brushing aside the vines, and looked inside through the broken window. The interior was dark and dusty. A few pieces of old furniture remained, covered in dirt and cobwebs. Milo could see that the floor was uneven, and the fireplace was filled with ash and leaves. Despite its condition, Milo felt hope. He imagined what it could become. This cabin could be his new home, his place of peace. He pushed the door open carefully. It creaked loudly but did not fall apart. Milo stepped inside, feeling the dust on the floor beneath his shoes. He walked from room to room, examining every corner. He found a small kitchen area, a fireplace, and 2 rooms that could serve as bedrooms. The roof seemed stable enough, though it needed repair. Milo smiled quietly to himself. He knew the work would be hard, but he also knew he was ready. That night, Milo made a small fire in the fireplace using dry wood he found nearby. He ate a simple meal from his bag and sat in the flickering light. He felt the quiet of the forest surround him. No car horns, no crowded streets, no endless noise. Just trees, wind, and the soft sound of animals moving in the dark. Milo realized that even though he had lost everything, he had found something more important: peace. The first few days in the forest were not easy. Milo had to find water, collect firewood, and sleep on the dusty floor. His muscles ached from walking long distances and carrying supplies. Rain made the cabin cold and damp, and nights were darker than he had expected. But each morning he woke up with determination. He cleaned small areas of the cabin, swept out leaves and dirt, and patched some of the holes in the roof with fallen branches. He felt a sense of accomplishment he had never felt in the city. Each small success gave him hope for the next day. One morning, while exploring near the cabin, Milo found an old well hidden by bushes. The water inside was clear and cold. He realized this could be his source of drinking water. He also discovered a small stream nearby that ran through the forest. Milo decided he could use the stream for bathing and washing clothes. The forest provided everything he needed, but he had to work for it. He spent hours each day collecting firewood, cleaning the cabin, and preparing food. He learned to make simple meals over the fire and to use plants and herbs from the forest safely. Milo began to enjoy the rhythm of his new life. He woke with the sun, worked during the day, and rested at night. He watched birds build nests and deer move silently through the trees. The sound of the forest became familiar, like an old friend. Milo even started keeping a journal. Each day he wrote about what he did, what he saw, and how he felt. Writing helped him reflect and remember why he had come to the forest. It also reminded him that he was capable of more than he had believed. One afternoon, Milo found an old box under the cabin floorboards while cleaning. Inside were small items left by the previous owner: a rusted lantern, a few old tools, and some worn books. He examined each item carefully. Some of the tools were broken, but Milo decided he could fix them. He felt a connection to the person who had lived here long ago. It was as if the cabin itself was welcoming him, giving him the tools he needed to start his new life. Milo cleaned the items and placed them carefully in a corner. He smiled, feeling a sense of continuity and purpose. As days turned into weeks, Milo grew stronger and more confident. The forest no longer seemed intimidating. It felt like home. He learned which plants were safe to eat, how to move quietly to avoid disturbing wildlife, and how to protect himself from sudden storms. Each day was a challenge, but Milo felt alive in a way he never had in the city. The old cabin, once broken and forgotten, began to feel like a place of hope and possibility. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned pink and orange, Milo stood outside the cabin. He looked at the tall trees surrounding him and the small clearing he had chosen for his home. He realized that losing everything had led him here. He had traded a life of uncertainty and stress for one of simplicity, self-reliance, and peace. Milo understood that the forest and the cabin were not just shelters. They were symbols of his new beginning. He smiled, knowing that tomorrow he would continue working, restoring the cabin, and building a life he could be proud of. Milo's journey had just begun, but he already knew that he was no longer lost. He had found a place where he could heal, grow, and discover what truly mattered. The forest welcomed him, the cabin gave him purpose, and Milo finally felt a sense of belonging he had never felt before. He understood that this life would not be easy, but it would be his, shaped by his own hands and filled with hope. The morning sun filtered through the tall trees, casting golden light on the old cabin. Milo woke early, as he had grown used to the rhythm of the forest. He stretched his arms and looked around, feeling both excitement and determination. The cabin still had many problems. The roof leaked in places, the floor was uneven, and the walls were covered in dirt and mold. Milo knew that restoring it would take time, patience, and hard work, but he felt ready for the challenge. He wanted this cabin to become not just a shelter, but a home that reflected his effort and care. After a simple breakfast of roasted vegetables and herbs he had collected from the forest, Milo began his work. He started with the roof. Broken shingles and fallen branches left the cabin vulnerable to rain. Milo gathered more wood and bark from the forest, choosing pieces that were strong and flat. Using the old hammer he had found in the cabin, he carefully replaced the damaged shingles. Each strike of the hammer sent a small echo through the trees. His hands grew sore, but Milo did not stop. Sweat ran down his face, yet he smiled, realizing that every repair brought him closer to making the cabin livable. Once the roof was secure, Milo moved inside. Dust and cobwebs covered every corner. He swept the floor, wiping the walls with water he had heated over the fire. The cabin smelled old and musty, but Milo imagined it as bright and fresh. He decided to clean one room completely each day. The first room he worked on had an old bed frame covered in dirt. He took the mattress outside and cleaned it carefully. Then he polished the wooden frame, noticing how the wood shone under his touch. It was a small victory, but it filled him with pride. Milo realized that even small steps could lead to big changes. While cleaning, Milo discovered more items left behind by the previous occupants. He found a small wooden chair, a rusted pot, and some old photographs. The photographs showed a family smiling in front of the cabin many years ago. Milo studied them closely. He wondered about the people who had lived here, about their stories and about why they had left. He felt a connection to them, as if restoring the cabin was not only for himself but also a way to honor their memory. He carefully placed the items on a shelf, keeping them safe and clean. Each day Milo worked on different parts of the cabin. He repaired broken windows by replacing the glass and fixing the frames. He patched cracks in the walls with mud and clay, using techniques he had read about in an old book he found in the cabin. The fireplace, which had been filled with ash and debris, was cleaned and polished. Milo arranged stones neatly around the hearth, imagining it filled with warmth during cold nights. As the days passed, the cabin began to feel less abandoned. The walls looked stronger, the rooms cleaner, and the atmosphere lighter. Milo could see the results of his effort, and it encouraged him to continue. Milo also improved the area outside the cabin. He cleared fallen branches and overgrown bushes, creating a small garden space. He planted herbs, vegetables, and flowers he had gathered from the forest. Each morning he watered the plants and watched them grow slowly. The garden became a symbol of his new life. The forest seemed to respond to his work. Birds sang more frequently near the cabin, and small animals like squirrels and rabbits appeared without fear. Milo felt a sense of harmony. He was no longer just living in the forest. He was becoming part of it. While Milo enjoyed the physical work, he also faced challenges. One day, a heavy rainstorm flooded part of the cabin. Water seeped through the roof in a few places, soaking the floor. Milo had to work tirelessly to remove the water and protect the cabin from further damage. Another day, a branch fell on one of the windows during a storm, breaking it completely. Milo carefully removed the shattered glass, cleaned the area, and replaced it with a new piece. Each obstacle tested his patience and skills, but he did not give up. Instead, he learned from each problem, improving his methods and becoming more resourceful. Milo also began to organize the items he found in the cabin. Old tools were cleaned and sharpened. Furniture was repaired and polished. He discovered a small chest that had been hidden under a pile of leaves. Inside were letters and small notebooks, some faded with age. Milo carefully read the letters, discovering stories of the family who had once lived in the cabin. They wrote about their daily lives, their struggles, and their joys. Milo felt inspired. He decided to keep the letters safe and display them in the cabin as a way to remember the past. As the weeks passed, the cabin changed dramatically. What had once been a dark, abandoned place now looked inviting. The walls were clean, the floors were level, and the rooms had a sense of order. The furniture, once broken and forgotten, looked useful and cared for. Milo had even built a small wooden table and chairs using old planks he found in the forest. He arranged the room so that sunlight fell on the table in the morning, creating a warm and welcoming space. Milo felt proud of what he had accomplished. Milo's connection to the forest grew stronger every day. He learned the patterns of the animals, knowing when deer would pass by and when birds would come to feed. He listened to the wind and rain, understanding how the weather changed. He even began to notice small signs in nature, like footprints in the mud or broken branches that guided him in his daily tasks. Living in the forest required attention and care, but Milo discovered that he loved the challenge. It made him feel alive and capable. One morning, Milo decided to improve the cabin further by adding decorations. He collected pine cones, stones, and colorful leaves from the forest. He made simple art pieces, arranging them on shelves and windowsills. He even crafted a small wreath for the door, giving the entrance a welcoming touch. Each decoration reminded him of the beauty of nature and his own effort to create a home. Visitors, if they came, would see not just a restored cabin, but a reflection of Milo's care, patience, and creativity. Milo also kept a daily journal. Each night, by the light of a small lantern, he wrote about his work, the changes he had made, and his thoughts about life. He reflected on the lessons he had learned from the forest, from hard work, and from living simply. Writing helped him understand that losing everything had led him to a place where he could rebuild not just his home, but his spirit. He wrote about the satisfaction of seeing a repaired window, a polished floor, or a growing plant in the garden. Each entry reminded him that progress, no matter how small, was worth celebrating. One evening, Milo sat outside the cabin and watched the sunset. The sky was painted with shades of pink, orange, and purple. The trees cast long shadows on the ground, and the air was cool and fresh. Milo felt a sense of peace that he had never experienced in the city. He thought about how far he had come. From a man who had lost everything, he was now someone who had built a home, learned to survive, and found happiness in simplicity. He understood that the forest and the cabin were more than just shelters. They were symbols of resilience, hope, and the beauty of hard work. Milo smiled quietly to himself. He knew that the work was not finished. There were still repairs to be made, more plants to grow, and more skills to learn. But he also knew that each day brought progress. Each effort, no matter how small, made a difference. He had learned to be patient, careful, and attentive. He had discovered that happiness was not in wealth or possessions, but in effort, nature, and the satisfaction of creating something meaningful. By the end of part 2, the old cabin had transformed from a dark, abandoned place into a space full of life and potential. Milo had worked tirelessly, facing challenges and learning from mistakes. He had repaired the roof, cleaned and polished the floors, restored furniture, and created a small garden. He had decorated the cabin with care and kept a journal to reflect on his journey. The forest had become his home, teaching him lessons about patience, resilience, and the beauty of simple living. Milo felt ready for the next steps, knowing that the cabin was not just a shelter but a place where his life could truly begin again. Milo woke early as always, hearing the gentle rustle of the leaves outside. The forest had become his home, and he knew every sound, every movement, and every pattern of the trees and animals. He stretched and looked around the cabin. The repairs he had made were holding well, and the small garden outside showed the first signs of growth. Tiny green shoots peeked from the soil, promising fresh vegetables and herbs in the weeks to come. Milo felt proud, but he also knew that living in the forest required constant attention and care. Each day brought new tasks and challenges. Milo began his morning by collecting water from the nearby stream. He had learned which parts of the stream were safe to drink from, and which were filled with fallen leaves and debris. He filled his bucket, carried it back to the cabin, and stored it in a clean container. The water was cold and fresh, and drinking it reminded him of how alive the forest made him feel. Milo had also built a small filter from cloth and sand to make sure the water was always clean. Every small improvement made his life easier and more comfortable. After washing his face and hands, Milo tended to his garden. He carefully watered the plants, removed weeds, and added small pieces of wood and stones to support growing stems. He had planted herbs like basil and mint, as well as vegetables like carrots, spinach, and tomatoes. The soil was rich and dark, and the sun warmed the garden each morning. Milo loved watching the plants grow. They were a sign of life and a reminder that patience and care could bring rewards. Each day he made notes in his journal about the garden, recording which plants grew fastest and which needed more attention. Once his garden work was done, Milo set out to explore the forest. He had learned to recognize the tracks of animals and the sounds of birds. Today he hoped to find more wild berries to add to his meals. He walked quietly, listening to the crunch of leaves beneath his feet and the distant calls of birds. The forest was alive, full of movement and energy. Milo had learned to move carefully so he would not disturb the animals. He discovered a small patch of wild strawberries hidden under low bushes. The berries were sweet and fresh, and Milo collected enough to add to his breakfast the next morning. Finding food in the forest required skill, but it also gave him a sense of independence he had never known in the city. When Milo returned to the cabin, he prepared a simple meal using the vegetables from his garden and the berries he had gathered. Cooking over the fire required attention, but he had become skilled at it. He roasted vegetables slowly, letting the smoke add flavor, and boiled water for tea from herbs he had grown. Eating in the quiet of the forest felt different than in the city. Every bite reminded him that he was surviving and thriving in a place where many people would struggle. Milo felt gratitude for the forest and for the opportunity to live this life. After breakfast, Milo began work on a new project. He wanted to create a small storage area for food and tools outside the cabin. He gathered wood from fallen branches and began building a simple shelf. Each plank had to be measured, cut, and placed carefully. The work was tiring, but Milo enjoyed it. He imagined the finished structure holding jars of dried herbs, preserved vegetables, and tools neatly organized. Having everything in order would make life easier and more efficient. Milo believed that the effort he put into building and organizing his home would pay off every day. As the day passed, Milo noticed the movement of animals near the cabin. A family of deer wandered into the clearing, cautiously looking at him but not afraid. Birds perched on the roof and nearby trees, singing as if welcoming him. Milo smiled and waved gently. He felt a sense of companionship with the forest creatures. Over time, they had come to recognize him as part of the forest. He understood their habits, their food sources, and their safe paths. Living in harmony with nature became a new way of life for Milo. He felt a connection that was impossible in the city, where life often separated humans from the natural world. In the afternoon, Milo decided to improve the cabin's interior. He cleaned the fireplace thoroughly, removing old ashes and arranging the stones around it neatly. He repaired some small cracks in the walls and polished the furniture he had restored. He also added a few decorations made from natural materials: pine cones, small stones, and dried flowers. Each item reminded him of the beauty of the forest and the effort he had made to create a welcoming home. Milo understood that these small touches made the cabin feel personal, warm, and full of life. Milo also practiced skills he would need for the future. He sharpened his tools, reinforced the cabin's door, and learned to make simple traps for small animals to help him catch food safely when necessary. Each skill required attention and patience, but Milo enjoyed the challenge. He had become self-reliant, learning to depend on his own abilities rather than the conveniences of city life. Every success, from repairing a tool to catching fish from the stream, gave him confidence and satisfaction. During his walks in the forest, Milo discovered a quiet pond hidden behind a thicket of trees. The water was still and reflected the sky and surrounding greenery. He realized this could be a place for relaxation and reflection. Milo often went there in the evenings to sit and watch the sunset. The calm water and the gentle sounds of nature helped him think, dream, and plan. He felt a sense of peace that was deeper than anything he had experienced before. This pond became a special place for him, a private retreat where he could connect with himself and the forest. Milo also began to notice the seasons changing. The days grew warmer and new flowers began to bloom. Birds migrated and returned, and the forest became richer with life. He observed the growth of his garden and adjusted his planting to match the changing conditions. Milo realized that living in the forest required understanding nature's rhythm. Every day he learned something new about plants, animals, and the land around him. The forest became not just a home but a teacher, guiding him toward patience, observation, and respect for life. One evening, Milo sat outside the cabin with a small lantern. The fire crackled gently, and the forest was quiet except for the occasional rustle of leaves. He reflected on how far he had come since leaving the city. He had lost everything, but in the process he had discovered a life that was full, meaningful, and connected to nature. Milo understood that happiness was not in possessions, wealth, or recognition. True contentment came from effort, simplicity, and living in harmony with the world around him. The forest had given him a second chance, and he was determined to make the most of it. Milo also began to plan for the future. He wanted to make the cabin even more comfortable and organized. He thought about building shelves for his tools, creating a small library with books and journals, and improving the garden. Each idea motivated him to continue working. He knew that progress required patience, and he was ready to put in the time. Milo felt excited about the possibilities that lay ahead. The forest was no longer just a place to escape. It was a place to grow, create, and live fully. As night fell, Milo lit a small fire outside and watched the stars appear. The sky was clear and the Milky Way stretched across it like a river of light. He felt small but connected, realizing that he was part of something much larger than himself. The forest, the cabin, and his work all blended together into a life that was both challenging and beautiful. Milo knew that every day brought lessons, growth, and new experiences. Living in the forest required courage, patience, and creativity, but Milo had discovered that he possessed all of these qualities. By the end of Part 3, Milo had become fully adapted to life in the forest. He had created a self-reliant routine, tending to his garden, finding food, maintaining the cabin, and observing nature. He had formed a quiet companionship with the forest creatures and discovered special places like the hidden pond that brought him peace. Milo had learned to work with the forest rather than against it. Understanding the rhythm of life and the importance of patience, the cabin had transformed into a comfortable, functional home, and Milo had grown into a capable, confident man. He realized that losing everything had led him to discover his true strength and a life full of purpose, connection, and hope. Milo woke to the soft glow of the morning sun streaming through the cabin window. The forest outside was alive with birdsong and rustling leaves. Life had settled into a comfortable rhythm, but Milo felt there was more he could do with the cabin. It was safe, clean, and functional, yet something inside him wanted to uncover its full potential. Today he decided to explore every corner of the cabin thoroughly, looking for hidden spaces, forgotten items, or anything that could help him understand the history of this place. He began by checking under the floorboards. Milo had already discovered some old tools and letters here before, but he suspected there might be more. He lifted each board carefully, listening for unusual sounds. After moving a few boards, his hand brushed against something smooth and wooden. Milo pulled it out and discovered a small, dusty chest hidden beneath the floor. It was heavier than he expected, with metal hinges that had rusted over time. His heart raced as he opened the chest. Inside, Milo found a collection of old family photographs, journals, and letters. The photographs were black and white, showing a family who had lived in the cabin decades ago. He could see a father, mother, and 2 children smiling together in front of the cabin, just as it looked now. The journals were delicate, filled with careful handwriting that described everyday life, struggles, and joys. Milo realized that the cabin had once been full of love, laughter, and memories. A wave of respect and responsibility washed over him. He knew that restoring this cabin fully would not just benefit him, it would honor the family who had lived here before. Milo spent hours reading the journals. He learned that the family had struggled with harsh winters and poor soil, yet they worked hard to make the cabin warm and welcoming. They described planting gardens, gathering firewood, and making simple furniture by hand. Some entries mentioned celebrations, birthdays, and small triumphs over difficulties. Milo felt a deep connection to these people even though they had lived so long ago. Their perseverance inspired him. He realized that restoring the cabin fully meant respecting their efforts and continuing their work in a new way. After finishing the journals, Milo decided to start a full restoration project. He wanted the cabin to look as good as it could, both inside and outside. He began by repairing the walls. Some boards were weak and cracked, so he replaced them carefully. He patched holes with clay and wood, ensuring that the walls would last through the seasons. Each repair required patience and attention, but Milo enjoyed the process. The cabin was slowly transforming, becoming sturdy, bright, and welcoming. Next, Milo focused on the floors. Some areas were uneven, and the wood had been damaged by years of neglect. He replaced damaged planks, polished the existing wood, and arranged rugs made from old fabric scraps he had found in the cabin. The floor now looked smooth and neat. Milo could walk across the cabin without worry, and the space felt warmer and more inviting. He realized that small changes could make a big difference, and he felt a sense of pride with each completed task. The furniture became Milo's next priority. He repaired broken chairs, polished tables, and fixed the old bed frames. Some pieces were missing parts, but Milo improvised using wood from fallen branches. He worked slowly, making sure everything was stable and functional. By the end of the week, the cabin felt almost new. The furniture was organized, the floors shone, and the walls were strong and clean. Milo could imagine the family who had lived here walking through the cabin, smiling at the care he had taken. Milo also restored the fireplace fully. He cleaned out old ashes, arranged the stones neatly, and built a small chimney repair using clay and bricks he found in the forest. He tested the fireplace with a small fire, watching the flames dance and warm the room. The glow of the fire brought life to the cabin, and Milo felt the comfort of a place ready to host him through cold nights. He arranged a small stack of firewood nearby, easy to reach, and made sure it stayed dry and ready for use. The next day, Milo tackled the windows. Some glass was broken, while other panes were missing completely. He carefully measured, cut, and replaced each pane using old wood frames he had cleaned and repaired. The sunlight now filled the rooms fully, highlighting the polished floors and organized furniture. Milo even added small curtains made from cloth scraps, giving the cabin a cozy, homely feeling. Each window completed made the space brighter and more welcoming, reflecting the forest outside beautifully. Outside, Milo continued to improve the cabin's surroundings. He cleaned the area around the garden, removed fallen branches, and planted new vegetables and herbs. He built a small fence using sticks and rope to protect his garden from wandering animals. Flowers he planted bloomed in different colors, attracting butterflies and birds. Milo felt a sense of accomplishment as the clearing transformed from wild and overgrown to organized and beautiful. His efforts were not only practical, but also created a place of peace and harmony in the forest. During his work, Milo discovered another hidden space. Beneath a loose floorboard in what had been the children's room, he found a small wooden box. Inside were handmade toys, small carvings, and tiny books. Milo smiled as he examined each item. They had belonged to the children of the family, long gone but preserved in the cabin. He decided to display these items on a small shelf, showing that the lives of those who had lived here were not forgotten. Milo realized that the cabin was not just a structure. It was a keeper of memories, a place where the past and present could meet. As Milo continued, word began to spread among the locals. Hikers and neighbors occasionally came near the forest, curious about the cabin. Some had assumed it was abandoned and unsafe, but Milo had worked quietly, restoring it fully. One day, a local family walked to the edge of the clearing, peeking in through the windows. They were surprised to see the cabin looking neat, bright, and welcoming. Milo greeted them with a warm smile, explaining that he had restored the cabin and cared for it every day. The visitors were amazed. They could not believe that an old forgotten cabin had been brought back to life by a single man living in the forest. Milo also created a small living space in the cabin for visitors. He arranged a few chairs, a small table, and space for someone to sleep if needed. He wanted the cabin to be a place where others could enjoy the forest, learn about simple living, and appreciate nature. The cabin was no longer just a home for Milo. It had become a symbol of hard work, dedication, and care. People who visited were inspired by what he had done, realizing that with effort, anything could be restored and made beautiful again. Evenings in the cabin became special moments for Milo. He would sit by the fireplace, looking at the restored furniture, polished floors, and the small collection of items from the past. The cabin smelled of fresh wood, herbs, and the faint smoke of a well-kept fire. Milo felt a deep satisfaction. He had transformed a broken, forgotten place into something alive and meaningful. The forest outside seemed to respond to his work. Animals came closer, birds sang more often, and the air itself seemed calmer and fresher. Milo realized that the cabin and the forest were now a reflection of his effort and spirit. One day, Milo found an old wooden ladder leaning against the cabin wall. Curious, he climbed to the loft area above the main room. The space was dusty and dark, filled with old boxes and forgotten items. Milo carefully cleaned the loft, discovering more tools, clothes, and small personal belongings. He organized the items, keeping what could be useful and storing the rest neatly. The loft became a small storage space, freeing the main rooms for living and making the cabin feel more open and comfortable. Milo felt satisfied knowing that no corner of the cabin remained neglected. By the end of Part 4, the cabin had undergone a remarkable transformation. What had once been a dark, abandoned, and forgotten building was now clean, organized, and welcoming. Milo had repaired walls, floors, windows, and furniture. He had restored the fireplace, created a functional garden, and discovered hidden treasures that connected him to the family who had lived there decades ago. Visitors were amazed by the cabin, unable to believe that a single man living alone in the forest had achieved such a restoration. Milo felt proud, not only because of the physical improvements, but because he had honored the history of the place while creating a home full of life, comfort, and purpose. Milo realized that his efforts were more than just repairs. They were a way to connect past and present, nature and human life, effort and reward. The cabin now stood as a place of beauty, inspiration, and hope. Milo understood that he had found a life far richer than anything the city had offered. The forest, the cabin, and his hard work had become a story of dedication and transformation, one that would inspire anyone who saw it. Milo woke to the sound of birds singing and the sun casting golden light over the forest. The cabin now looked like it belonged in a magazine. The walls were clean, the furniture restored, and the floors polished. The garden was thriving with fresh vegetables, herbs, and colorful flowers. Milo walked outside and breathed deeply, feeling proud of all he had accomplished. The forest seemed even more alive, as if it shared his excitement. Today, Milo planned to explore the surrounding area and enjoy the results of months of hard work. As he walked along a familiar path, Milo noticed signs of other hikers in the forest. Footprints and small campsites suggested that people were curious about the cabin. Word had begun to spread in nearby towns about the man who had restored the old cabin. Some locals were skeptical, thinking it impossible that a single person living in the forest could achieve such a transformation. Milo, however, was not concerned with what others thought. He was focused on the forest, the cabin, and his own satisfaction in creating something meaningful. Returning to the cabin, Milo decided to improve the interior further. He rearranged furniture for better comfort and used natural materials to make the space more welcoming. Small decorations like pine cones, stones, and dried flowers were placed carefully around the rooms. He even set up a small corner with the family's old photographs and letters he had discovered months ago. It was a quiet tribute to the people who had once lived here, reminding Milo that the cabin had a history that was worth honoring. Every detail in the cabin now told a story, blending the past and present seamlessly. Later in the day, Milo heard voices approaching. A group of locals had arrived, curious to see the cabin for themselves. Milo greeted them warmly and invited them inside. Their eyes widened in amazement. The once abandoned cabin was now bright, clean, and full of life. They walked from room to room, examining the polished floors, repaired furniture, and restored fireplace. Milo explained the work he had done, showing them how he had repaired the walls, replaced broken windows, and created a functional garden. The visitors were stunned. They had expected a small, run-down cabin, but what they saw was a home full of care and attention. One of the visitors, an older man named Harold, asked about the photographs and letters displayed on the shelf. Milo explained how he had discovered the chest under the floorboards and learned about the family who had lived here decades ago. Harold was impressed. He said that few people would take the time to preserve history in such a meaningful way. Milo smiled, realizing that the work he had done was not only about restoring a building but also about keeping memories alive. The cabin was more than a home. It had become a symbol of respect, patience, and dedication. Over the next few weeks, more people came to see the cabin. Some hikers wanted to learn about surviving in the forest, others were curious about the restoration process, and a few simply wanted to admire the beauty of the place. Milo welcomed everyone. He taught simple skills like growing a garden, collecting water safely, and maintaining a shelter. He shared stories about the forest, the family who had lived in the cabin, and the lessons he had learned from living close to nature. Visitors were inspired by his knowledge, patience, and the life he had built from nothing. Milo also began organizing small gatherings at the cabin. He invited locals and travelers to come together and share stories, food, and experiences. The cabin became a place where people learned to appreciate simple living and the beauty of nature. Milo watched with satisfaction as families laughed, children played, and visitors explored the garden. The once lonely forest clearing was now alive with activity, yet it remained peaceful and harmonious. Milo realized that he had created something far greater than a restored cabin. He had built a community connected to nature and each other. One evening, Milo took a walk to the hidden pond behind the cabin. The water reflected the sky, trees, and the warm glow of the setting sun. He watched as small fish swam near the surface and birds perched nearby. The pond had become a place for reflection, inspiration, and peace. Milo thought about how far he had come. Losing everything had led him to this forest, to the cabin, and to a life that was more fulfilling than anything he had known in the city. He realized that challenges, hard work, and patience had shaped him into a stronger, more capable person. Milo's work in the cabin continued, even as visitors came and went. He repaired small details, organized his storage areas, and kept the garden thriving. He made sure the space remained welcoming, clean, and comfortable. He also continued writing in his journal, documenting his experiences, discoveries, and thoughts. Writing helped him reflect on the journey from losing everything to creating a meaningful life. Each entry reminded him that effort, care, and attention to detail could transform not only a cabin but a life. One morning, a group of local school children visited the cabin with their teacher. They were curious about forest life and wanted to see Milo's work. Milo guided them around the cabin, explaining how he had restored the building, grown the garden, and learned to live in harmony with nature. The children listened intently, asking questions and pointing at the restored furniture and decorations. They were amazed that one person could do so much. Milo encouraged them to try small projects themselves, teaching them the importance of patience, hard work, and respect for the environment. The children left inspired, carrying stories and lessons to share with their families. Milo also hosted visitors who were interested in learning survival skills. He showed them how to safely gather food, make simple repairs, and maintain a fire. He emphasized the importance of understanding the forest, observing nature, and working carefully. Visitors learned not just practical skills but also the value of patience, mindfulness, and perseverance. Milo saw the joy and confidence growing in their eyes, knowing that he was passing on lessons that could help others live more meaningful lives. One afternoon, Milo received a visit from a journalist who had heard about the cabin restoration. The journalist walked through the cabin, taking notes and photographs. Milo explained how he had restored the walls, floors, furniture, and garden, and shared the story of the family who had lived there before. The journalist was amazed and said the story would inspire many people to value effort, patience, and connection to nature. Milo smiled quietly, feeling that his hard work had become something larger than himself. The cabin was no longer just a home. It was a story of transformation and hope. As the weeks passed, Milo realized that his life had completely changed. The forest, the cabin, and the work he had done gave him a sense of purpose and fulfillment he had never experienced in the city. He had turned a broken, abandoned place into a home full of life, comfort, and inspiration. Visitors came to learn, explore, and be inspired. Milo had created a space that connected the past with the present, humans with nature, and effort with reward. The cabin had become a beacon of hope, showing that even when life seems lost, hard work and care can lead to extraordinary results. Milo also reflected on the personal growth he had experienced. He had learned patience, perseverance, and self-reliance. He had discovered skills he never knew he possessed and gained confidence in his abilities. The forest taught him to observe, adapt, and respect life in all its forms. The cabin taught him to value effort, detail, and history. Milo understood that losing everything was not the end of his life, but the beginning of a journey that led to strength, fulfillment, and connection. In the evenings, Milo often sat outside the cabin watching the sunset. The forest glowed with warm colors and the air was filled with the gentle sounds of nature. He felt grateful for every challenge, every repair, and every lesson learned. The cabin, once forgotten and abandoned, now stood as a symbol of hope, effort, and transformation. Milo knew that he had created something lasting, not just a home but a story that would inspire anyone who saw it. By the end of Part 5, Milo's life had changed completely. The forest had become his home, the cabin a symbol of dedication, and his hard work a source of inspiration for others. Visitors marveled at what he had accomplished. Children learned valuable lessons, and locals respected the care he had taken to honor the cabin's history. Milo had discovered that true happiness comes not from wealth or possessions, but from effort, patience, and a connection to life around him. The cabin was no longer just a shelter. It was a place of inspiration, hope, and new beginnings. Milo smiled, feeling complete. He had lost everything, but in doing so he had found life, purpose, and peace. The forest, the cabin, and his hard work had transformed not only the space but himself. Milo's story became known in the area as a tale of determination, restoration, and the power of simple living. He realized that life's greatest rewards often come after the hardest challenges, and in the quiet of the forest, surrounded by trees, animals, and the home he had built, Milo finally felt truly alive.